I've been around gardening and a little bit of farming for almost all my life. I remember when I was little, I used to go to my grandpa's farm and see his rows of fields and even play on his tractor. And every summer, I helped my dad garden in his backyard, growing pumpkins and cucumbers and pretty much everything. But one thing that I didn't see at either of their houses was a compost. And after researching this, which I really did have a genuine interest in it, not just for the speech, I figured that it's really important for everyone to know, if they're a gardener, a farmer, or just the average person like me, to know what a compost is, how to make one, and a bin to hold it, and the benefits of one. So let's get started. So I know a lot of you probably have heard the word compost and might know a little bit about what it is, but a compost is basically taking food waste and other organic waste and turning it into rich fertilizer with the help of microorganisms. And these are bacteria, fungi, and even worms. And for these tiny microscopic creatures, they need 4 essential ingredients to make a compost successful. The first one is carbon, and this is kind of the food, not the actual food, but it's what gives the bacteria energy. And the second is nitrogen. It's what will break down the carbon. The third is moisture. Now you should always keep your compost damp because that's what's going to create bacterial growth. And then the last one is oxygen. Now oxygen promotes the bacteria to keep living because the most important bacteria need oxygen to survive. Now that you know what a compost is and the essential ingredients, we can get into how to make one. So this is obviously not an 18-gallon trash can, which is what you would normally use. But for the purpose of my demonstration today, I chose a clear, tiny one just so you can see everything that's going on inside. And before we actually put anything inside of the bin, we'll create holes. Now, these are not actual holes, just Sharpie marks, but it shows you where the holes should go. So it should go on the top, the bottom, and the sides, just for maximum airflow. And the first thing that goes in is newspaper. And I just recycled some old assignments, but you'll just lay these on the bottom. I believe this is what gives it the carbon. And it should be full about a quarter of the way. All right. And then is the dirt. Now I used dirt that I recycled from some old plants that were dying, but normally you would just use dirt straight from the ground, so there's no additives. And this is where all the nitrogen will go. It will just be a breeding grounds for the bacteria, basically. All right. So just make sure the newspaper is all nice and covered, so there's distinct separate layers. All right. And now I just use some strawberries. This is the actual food. This is, they call it the greens. It can be grass clippings. It can be even pet hair. I don't know if you guys knew that, but pet hair is compostable. So if you have a pet that sheds a lot like mine does, maybe it'd be useful to put it in your compost. And right now I'm just cutting up the strawberry so it just decomposes faster so the bacteria don't have to work a lot. And while I do this, I'd just like to tell you guys a little bit about what you shouldn't put in your compost. So, you know, fruits and vegetables, grass clippings, leaves, those are all fine. But you really shouldn't put in any meat, dairy, or bones because those will draw flies, and flies lead to maggots. And you really don't want maggots in your compost. Those are just not good. You can have worms, but maggots aren't going to help you any. They're just going to be gross like maggots are. And once you have those in there, you'll just stir it up a little bit, make sure it's covered with dirt, and usually people would use a pitchfork just because of the size, but I've got a fork. And then you'll just give it a good spray, making sure it's a little moist because that's you don't want your compost to dry out or anything. Like I said previously, you want to keep it moist so that bacteria is growing in there. And then you'll just, like I just stirred it up. You'll do that every 2 to 4 weeks, just so every part of it gets the same amount of heat, because the center of the compost will heat up, and that's how the bacteria works. So you'll just make sure everything's getting some equal heat so it works, and you'll set it in either a sunny or a shady spot, depending on how fast you want it to compost, because again, heat's what really starts it up. And then about 3 months-ish is kind of like the minimum of how long you should keep it there. But I've heard stories of people keeping their compost up to a year, and it really just gets it even richer for the fertilizer. And after you're done, you just pop it in your garden and plant your flowers, and they'll take way less time to grow if you use fertilizer instead of regular soil. So now that you've seen how easy it is to make a compost bin, I can tell you about how it not only benefits your garden and your flowers, but how it benefits the world. And the first benefit is that it doesn't emit any greenhouse gases, like hardly any at all. It actually combats the production of methane, which is one of the most, affects the ozone the most. And it also saves businesses money, because each business has to pay some trucks to take their waste to the landfills. And if they just switched over to composting, I've seen reports saying that companies have saved over $100,000 by doing that. And finally, it reduces space in landfills, because even last year, 95% of space in landfills was food waste. So if we all just teamed up and we made like a community compost even, that would save so much space in a landfill. So I hope you all have learned something today, from what a compost is and the essential ingredients, to how to make a bin that can hold your compost, and how it benefits the world. I hope you all can take this knowledge and make your own compost. And this summer I'll even be trying to convince my dad to make compost for his garden. And hopefully you guys can too, and save the world one compost bin at a time. Thank you.